Hallo zusammen von der NAMM Show 2016. Es gibt neue Cakewalk Expansion Packs für Sonar. Der Greg ist bei uns, der hat die entwickelt. Hi Greg.
Hi. Guten Abend.
So you've developed some new expansion for Cakewalk Sonar.
Yes, I'm in a very lucky position. Because we are part of Gibson, I have access to the world's greatest lending library for guitar players.
Yeah.
So people were telling me, Craig, you should really try out the Les Paul standard bass, you'll love it, because I play an EB5. And I'm like, well, basses are kind of the same, right? And they said, you got to check this out. So I borrowed it, and I loved it, and I like playing keyboard bass as well as real bass, so I thought I'd sample it. And then they said, well, have you played with the Midtown bass? And I said, no. And they said, well, it's real different because it looks like an ES335, kind of thin line cutaway, but it's cut from a solid block of wood, whereas most thin line guitars have a center block and they laminate the wood around it. So that was another different tone. It was very bright and kind of pop and full. And then I had the EB5, so I sampled these for myself. Cakewalk heard them and said, oh, we should put out an expansion pack. So now we have one. It's called the Gibson Bass Collection. There are 3 basses, the EB5 string bass, the Les Paul bass, the Midtown bass. Each bass has 2 programs for each pickup combination, so bridge, neck, neck and bridge. The EB5 has an unusual pickup wiring situation where you can get 8 distinct different sounds. So there's 16 programs for that, 28 programs total in the pack, and key switching. So if you notice here, let's look at the Les Paul for a second. It says bridge pick. That's a pick sound, but if you hit the lowest C, it turns into a finger style attack. The thumb one gives a finger style attack. When you hit the key switching, it gives a quick decay, so it's more like a synthesizer. So can I play some sounds? Will you hear them okay?
Yeah.
So we have, regular bass pitches and things. On the 4-string basses, I added notes to go all the way down to B. So you basically have a 5-string Les Paul bass or a 5-string Midtown bass, and then to add some realism, there's slides, up-down slides. Okay, so if you're using the pick, here, now I'll play you the difference in the articulation. I don't know how well you'll hear it with this bass, but here it is with the pick sound. And here it is with the finger. All right?
At least I could hear it.
Okay, good. Well, now here's the last thing, because I don't want to take up all your time here. But the Rapture Pro expansion synthesizer has what's called the instruments page, and so these are all real-time controls. They're great for assigning to controllers on a keyboard, so you can really tweak things. And so let me call up a different patch here that you can really hear it on the microphone maybe better. We'll do the neck plus bridge. That's a pretty big kind of sound. And we'll bump it up an octave. Okay, so here's what the instrument page does. There's bass and treble tone controls. I don't have to show you that. I think you know what that is. There's an 8-string effect. So let's listen to that. There's a sub-octave, so you can get a really earth-shattering kind of tone, which you'll never pick up on that mic, but trust me, it's there. Between the 8-string and the sub-octave, you can get a huge sound. There's a feature I call a touch filter. So it responds to the dynamics of your playing. There's growl, which gives it a nasty kind of amp sound. There's chorus and depth, so you can get stereo imaging and chorusing and that sort of thing. You won't hear the stereo, so we won't bother with that. But there's also 2 XY pads. One of them, the XY pad 1, does LFO vibrato rate and speed. And then the other one adds distortion to the 8-string or sub-octave sounds, so you can get extra kind of grit on those. So that's basically the story. The main thing I want to get across, these are not multi-sampled, and there's a reason for that. They take up very little memory. They load in about 2 seconds, but I use the synthesis capabilities in Rapture. Let me show you, for example. You can see that a lot of parameters are tied to the instrument controls and a lot of parameters are tied to velocity. So I get the kind of expressiveness you'd get with multi-samples, different attacks, different amounts of filtering. It's a very realistic sound, but you don't have those awkward transitions between layers and things like that. So that's so it plays very much like a keyboard bass. It feels like a keyboard bass. It has that kind of consistency. A lot of people have commented as, well, this is just the sound that I would want to get after miking it and EQing it and getting a perfect performance and all that. So it does all that, but it has that warm, organic bass kind of quality. And the difference between the 3 basses is really quite significant. There's a YouTube video that I did for Cakewalk that plays different examples of the basses and shows how this works. And when you hear it, you'll go, I didn't realize there could be that much difference in bass sounds. So that's why all 3 of them are in there. And that's the story.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Thank you, Nikolai.
Also, wer Cakewalk schon hat, das ist doch ein weiterer Grund, solltet ihr euch angucken. Wer Cakewalk so nah noch nicht hat, das ist ein weiterer Grund, um das doch mal wirklich auszuprobieren. Das war's von uns hier. Dranbleiben.